Hey guys, it's Perceive Me here. I wanted to bring you guys something a bit different than a normal Destiny 2 competitive or trials match. I really enjoy having more in-depth discussions about gaming and the direction games are going in. And I can't think of a better person to have with me for this Destiny 2 deep dive than Crystic. So, Crystic, thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah. And I wanted to call attention to the body of work and in-depth breakdowns you have on Reddit, especially when it comes to how you broke down the way mobility works and how it affects your strafe, but not your sprint speed. And you also gave us all the weapons and exotics that do affect the sprint speed and how they interact with each other. And there's a lot more there in that guide, but you really gave players a way to min-max the stats they want and also gave insight into the movement systems that are at play in Destiny 2, and there aren't many people who go that in depth with the game. And I've seen a lot of content creators cite that work, not only the mobility breakdown, but the recoil direction stat breakdown for weapons as well. And it's impressive. And I wanted to ask how you first got into Destiny and how you got to the point where you got super deep into the mechanics of it.
Okay. Uh, well, I think I got into Destiny like most people did. I tried out the beta.
Yeah.
Um,
And that was back from
for
Destiny 1, correct?
right, yeah, from D1, and I got an Xbox One mainly for Master Chief Collection, and that turned out to be a complete bomb.
Yeah.
So, but then this beta came out. I remember I tried it before the Xbox One. I think it came out on the 360, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah.
But I started playing it and I was like, "Bro, this game is sick." Like
Yeah.
the especially the
It hooked you.
Crucible, I v just running around using my Shingen C or whatever garbage green weapon I had, and, I just been loving how, how the guns shoot, how the aim assist works. It's literally the only reason why people still play Destiny, I feel,
Yeah. There's
at
a
least
lot
for
there.
PvP.
Yeah.
Um To go into when I started doing, like, analysis of game mechanics, I think it started with the Mida multi-tool. So, in D1, the Mida literally just says it increases your movement. That's all it says.
Yeah. It was vague. Correct.
Destiny has this way with, mechanics and perks where it'll just tell you what it does, but it won't actually tell you what it does, like,
Yeah.
specifically.
Yeah. They definitely have a way with words.
Right. So in D1, they had a stat called agility, which is basically mobility, but different named, I guess. And Mida increased your sprint speed and gave you uh +2 agility, but then Mida also had lightweight on it. This is another +2. It was ridiculous. But back then no one even knew what, like, when you were looking at a tab of a gun, and it's had, like, a stat that just says +2 agility. What does that even mean to you? I remember reading that, I'm like, "What does this even mean? +2 agility?"
Yeah.
I didn't even know what agility was, and I'm like, "Okay, well, what's agility?" And I go in the stat menu. They don't even give you numbers, it's a bar. What does +2 even signify in this bar?
Yeah.
There's no numbers. So I'm, like, literally out here, if I don't understand this, and I was, like, studying to be a computer engineer, I'm like, "There's no fucking way someone else will know this."
Yep.
So, that was on my journey, like, "Alright, I gotta start learning how everything works." And, I think it was the beginning of Destiny 2 where I really started to dive really deep into the mechanics of the game.
Yeah, and have that deeper understanding. And the reason I'm excited about Destiny 2 today is that we just got our hands on Season of the Haunted and all the ability changes and sandbox tuning that came with it. And we kind of got a sense of the direction they want to take Destiny multiplayer in. And it's been a while since we've seen a meaningful change to the special ammo economy in PvP and also the in-air efficiency of weapons. So, Christic, did you like the Season of the Haunted update so far?
I think I'm kind of with the community. I'm a little split. Like, there's a lot of mixed reactions to it. as far as the sandbox goes, I think it's pretty good. The special ammo
Yeah.
economy, at least for trials and like survival, probably not going to matter too much. The biggest changes are obviously Solar 3.0, and honestly, the biggest change to me was the snapshot nerf. So
Okay. So you noticed
it's
that.
it's very noticeable. They cut
All right.
its effectiveness in half, but that's
Yeah.
pretty minor.
And I kind of want to set the foundation here. So when Destiny 2 launched in September of 2017, there were three main elements that players had access to: Void, Solar, and Arc. And these elements became the light-based subclasses that dictated the suite of abilities players had access to depending on the one they were using. So if we fast forward to 2022, those three core elemental subclasses all used an old diamond node system where their subclass interface had three sets of diamonds and they all had four fixed abilities within them. So there would be a top tree diamond, a middle tree diamond, and a bottom tree diamond for each element, and they were all different from each other. So over the course of 5 years, this diamond node system became dated. And when they introduced a new darkness element like stasis, which focused a lot around freezing and slowing things down, it also came alongside a new aspect and fragment system to customize the elemental subclass even more. So you'd be able to use two stasis aspects that acted as your core abilities you could build craft around, and you'd have around 4 to 5 fragment slots that acted as complementary abilities you could pick and choose from. So being able to mix and match aspects and fragments gave players a lot more agency over how they can build craft their subclass. And when you compare it to the old diamond node system that only let you choose between three different trees, and the Sandbox team over at Bungie, it was kind of they were kind of tasked with revisioning the three core light-based subclasses and having them fit into the aspect and fragment framework. And this is what we call the 3.0 subclass updates for the three light-based subclasses. So there would be a Void 3.0, a Solar 3.0, and an Arc 3.0 update. And they're working under the premise that Destiny 2 is an evolving game, and the sandbox needs to evolve with it. And I agree with that sentiment, but there's a lot that goes into that. And Christic, I don't know if you had anything to add there.
Um, no, I pretty much agree. I think that it does need to evolve. Back in D1, we basically had, selectable perks. Not quite as in depth as the 3.0 classes are now, but yeah, from the Destiny 2 launch, basically nothing much has changed for years. So this is pretty much a huge shakeup.
Yeah. Because if you look at the Destiny 2 sandbox holistically, it's very broad and it includes all the weapons you use, the armor you use, the abilities and the perks, and even the enemies you're in the sandbox with. So, anytime you make a major change or an update to something that a player is going to interact with, it's going to change the way the game's played and can also affect the direction the game goes in. Because the audience a game has is normally made up of the people who play the game or have played it at some point. So it really brings up the question like, what are the identities of these elemental subclasses for hunters, titans, and warlocks? And how do you leverage their strengths and hide their weaknesses to make them all appealing, but also differentiate them from one another? And I know, like, traditionally, the elements like void, solar, and arc, like, void would normally deal with gravity, so like pushing and pulling. Solar would deal with like burning and AoE, and damage over time, and Arc would deal with like lightning and chaining and quick movements and like electricity. So you kind of want those to be intuitive to a player, like the identities of these elements. So if they see like a fire grenade, they can think in their head solar. Like that's the kind of intuitiveness you want. And it gets interesting when the classes use the elements for their power fantasy. So for example, like Hunter, Titan, and Warlock, like they have to have those elements complement the power fantasy that they intend the player to have. So for example, when I think of a solar hunter, like a gunslinger hunter, I think of like the golden gun being precise and having a kit that is kind of built around and plays into being accurate. And when I envision a world after all the 3.0 subclasses get updated, I see a role for gunslingers where they're the class that benefits the most for creating damage events like burning someone or being precise and hitting headshots. And I think they should fill that role in a way that wouldn't get, or in a way that you wouldn't get as much in another subclass. Like proposition that a gunslinger should have is accuracy and being able to reinforce that in some way. And I think right now, I'm not sure if Solar 3.0 really hits that mark in PvP. And Crystic, I don't know if you had anything to add about like Hunter specifically for Solar 3.0, but I also wanted to kind of hear your thoughts on where the other Solar subclasses sit with you as well.
Sure. For Hunter specifically on the 3.0 update, I think they leveraged a lot of from the other subclasses. Like they kind of took a lot of aspects from the other solar subclasses. Like you had the healing grenade, which is now universal. You
Correct.
have, you can use pretty much every grenade, but you're going to use your main grenades usually. Um, obviously you have the burning stuff, which was kind of in the middle tree gunslinger, where if you were like burning someone, you would get your class ability. I think that's a fragment now
Yeah.
or something like that. But we did see a lot of bones being broken from the original gunslinger, where like, gunslinger's trance got removed. That was the stability on precision kills. Um, and they kept knock 'em down, which was like the reload and was it handling, I think it gives on precision kills, but you also get max stacks when you dodge, so a little less of a need to headshot
Yeah.
people.
It's less valuable than
Right, and
stability.
they also changed the way the heavy knife worked, where if you threw it, got a headshot, and got an instant kill, you usually got it back. Now it just gives you back your dodge,
Yep.
or so that's kind of strange, but maybe you can use the gambler's dodge to dodge and then get your knife back, but it just kind of, like, extends I guess, the moment-to-moment gameplay.
Yeah. It makes it harder to loop the
I
ability.
do like the identity of the gunslinger though, as this like kind of Batman, got a bunch of tools on your belt. You got like 5 knives to choose from. You have this weird makeshift trip mine thing.
Yeah.
Um, you know, I feel like they got almost there with the
Yeah.
power fantasy.
There's a spot for it.
Yeah, out of all the solar subclasses, Hunter I feel like is the probably the closest I think to actually being fully realized.
Yeah. Where do Titans sit with you? I know you're kind of warlock, but
I play all the subclasses honestly, but Titan, I always say to people that I'm not a Titan main. I just main one-eyed mask.
oh, go.
I haven't taken it off since it came out, but when I do play it, like I do like the fact that am able to use shoulder charge again because I always ran bottom tree, Sunbreaker, but now I can use the shoulder charge for movement basically. But now it's kinda like they added this weird melee thing where it looks cool, but, like, I feel like that's not it didn't feel like that was the identity of the Sunbreaker. I felt like
Yeah.
they kind of maybe took that a little bit from Behemoth of, like, the movement slam kinda deal.
Yeah. The utility.
Um, they changed a lot of the old synergies that Sunbreaker had to where, you can still see a semblance of the Sunbreaker, but not much has changed, honestly. Um, I mean, one of the aspects is like getting an ability kill gives you your damage to more like gives makes your abilities do more damage.
Yeah.
But then they reduced how much it used to do on the original node of 2.0. And like I feel like an aspect should be a game defining moment to moment gameplay changing
Yeah. Like
factor.
the core ability of the
Yes,
class.
this is something you build around,
Yeah.
right? Getting ability kills to give you more damage on ability kills, I don't know about you, man, but that sounds boring, right? More damage is just more damage, like,
Yeah.
that's I don't know, I don't think you can make a build out of that, and I think a lot of the community is railing on them because like, we got this melee thing, but we can't use this for anything. It's not good in PvP unless you get a one shot. It's kind of
Yeah.
strange.
Like you wouldn't play it any differently than you would have before.
Right. Well, with the exception of like being able to shoulder charge, but I don't know. Like when I compare it to Sentinel, like Void 3.0, Sentinels came out hot, uh, which is funny because Solar 3.0 did not come out hot. So,
Yeah. Now, your thoughts on Warlock? But yeah, we'll go into the comparisons in a sec. But I don't know if you had
so
anything for Warlocks.
I played probably the most of Warlock uh, for the past couple of days,
Okay.
and
Because I would argue they turned out the best, if I had to
okay, so
guess.
if it depends on where you're looking.
Okay.
So for PvE, Warlock got the shaft. I'm not gonna lie to you. Like the middle tree, Well of Radiance, was like basically my tree that I use in PvE, and they took all the synergy out of it. Like like it doesn't work with Luma anymore. Like they changed the Benevolent Dawn to a fragment, which doesn't work with Boots of the Assembler or Lumina. You know, they took away a bunch of perks. They nerfed well. They changed, the healing grenade now is a global thing, so it's not even special to the warlock anymore. They complete the bottom tree for Dawnblade. Whew, they literally took out everything except the Phoenix dive thing, and they're like, you know what would be a good idea if this replaced the Rift cooldown, but like with the same cooldown. They could have gotten away with it if they used Icarus Dash and had that as the class ability because that already has a cooldown, and that you could have had maybe a Phoenix dive kind of aspect to build around.
Yeah.
And something that that I thought about if you had that is like if that was the class ability, you'd have to choose between having a Rift or baller movement, which everyone is you know love it or hate it, and it would actually allow you to invest in something like Icarus Dash. So, like, if you wanted to have a really fast cooldown for it, you could.
Yeah.
But other than that, Top Tree Drawn kind of just gotten the same. Like, it's either the same or better than it used to be. And Top Tree Drawn was already arguably the best subclass in the game.
Yeah.
So, I mean, PvP wise, they're still the best. PvE wise, I mean, you got the Roy Mustang flick. It's cool, but I wouldn't say it's game breaking or anything.
Yeah. And it's interesting because like when you compare it to Void 3.0, like Void 3.0, there's a lot there that makes it enticing. Like you have access to the debuffs like suppressions, um, you have access to invisibility, overshields, and devour. And a lot of the perks there are perks you proc before a gunfight happens. And I don't know if it's worth trading that off to play any Solar 3.0 classes. And some might argue that it is, but I think there's a lot more depth to the game when you have to give something up to use another thing. And there's a trade off involved when you make decisions as a player. But for that trade off to be meaningful, both choices have to be worth using.
Yeah.
And it's interesting because once the 3.0 updates were announced, I kind of said to myself, I wonder which subclass would change the least from a 3.0 update. Because wouldn't that mean it's already the closest to the power fantasy they envisioned for that class already?
Right. You would think that would be solar, right? They were already pretty close. They were all very strong subclasses on their own without an update.
Yeah.
And I think that is actually what stems from all the negativity, where the negativity stems from is because they were such good subclasses that uh, adding more customization, but like reducing the potency of each individual subclass kind of pissed off a lot of
Homogenizes
people.
it. Yeah.
And it's very homogenized. This is the fear I had coming from Void 3.0, where like, we lost the eating the grenade to heal yourself or devour. Um, you know, Hunters lost the what is it, the heart of the pack buff
Yep.
thing. Very minor, in comparison to what Solar 3.0 kind of did. They kind of just took out some of the people's favorite things and added, hey, here's some ignite burn stuff, kind of generic things explode. And
Yeah, but at the cost of certain gameplay loops. And
right.
yeah,
And I wanted to just briefly go over the Void 3.0 was
yeah,
way more thought out, way more like fully kitted out. Like
yeah,
you had three buffs. You had Devour, Overshield, and Invisibility, and
yeah,
each one of those was assigned to the the Hunter, the Warlock, and the Titan.
yeah. They were all good at each
That
one.
there was an identity, right? And the debuffs were all kind of there. Some did better than others on certain subclasses. But for Solar, what is the identity of Solar? It's just exploding and healing. But like, is there one that does one better than the other one?
Yeah.
I don't think so.
And it's interesting, especially when it comes to the solar element, because before Solar 3.0 and the updates, you could argue Dawnblade Warlocks had a very good kit compared to the other subclasses, but a lot of people wouldn't have put Gunslingers and Hammer Titans on top of their PvP tier lists if they were to make one. So I wonder how much that limited what they could do for Gunslingers and Hammer Titans without making Dawnblade Warlocks too strong. And it kind of circles back to like that homogeny. And it kind of brings up the question, like, if a subclass feels samey after a 3.0 update, is that a good thing or is that a missed opportunity?
Well, I'd say it's a little bit of both. The best thing about 3.0 is that they have the ability to add to it. Like the
Yeah,
stasis was able to add more aspects, more fragments, stuff like that. Whereas, before they were just stagnant for, years.
yeah,
But right now, they didn't come out super hot. They probably aren't going to get nerfed. Maybe top three John gets looked at, but it's been in the game for so long now. Who knows?
yeah,
Um, I mean, it's really hard to say, honestly. I would probably wager that I'd rather them come out super hot and get people engaged in the game. Have people like really love the game. I'd rather people like the game and then like have a nice honeymoon phase. Like how every launch day there's a honeymoon phase. A week passes and then all those complaints start to come up.
yeah,
Literally day one, if you looked at the Reddit, people were pissed. Like, I think it has to do with the fact that Bungie did not have any promotional material for this season, so it just exploded. So,
yeah. And like you can give a subclass more grenades with a 3.0 update and have it play the same, but you could also build into the strength of the subclass that it already did well and make players approach it from like a completely different lens. And a lot of that's dependent on the aspects and the subclasses that have them. Like you really have to ask yourself, like, how do you gauge the success of a 3.0 update? Because the people who already mainly play on a solar subclass probably aren't going to switch to a different one if they already kind of identify as that or like can relate to it and that's just their favorite. But if you get someone who's used to playing a 3.0 void subclass to switch to a 3.0 solar subclass, it speaks a lot to the value proposition that solar offers.
yeah, I'd agree, and honestly, I think that after a few weeks, we'll probably see people going back to Void because honestly, none of them are stronger than each Void subclasses, at least in PvP. You know, I mean, obviously, you can argue Top Tree Dawn is better than Voidwalker, but I'd say both of them are pretty viable. Whereas Gunslinger, if you were using Gunslinger before, you can get away with using it now. Whereas in Sunbreaker, same deal. But you know, there was no people expected a lot more, and they got pretty much the same or less. So
Yeah.
I don't know.
And when I think back to like the Beyond Light DLC and Stasis being launched with Beyond Light and coming in hot and kind of being like the most dominant thing in PvP for a long time, though it got nerfed multiple times since, like I don't think that's the bar. But like when you compare Solar 3.0 to like Stasis launching, I don't think the bar of success should be set as just, oh, it didn't break the sandbox. That means it worked. Like, and it's important because down the line, when there's 3.0 versions of all subclasses and one's underrepresented, if you run into instances where having one strong exotic and you give it to like an underused class, it's not going to give a player as much variety as having a strong base subclass kit. Like as both a player and when you play against someone, like even if you think back before Season of the Haunted and take an underused subclass like Solar Hammer Titan in PvP, people were mainly using it because you could one-shot body people with the Lorelei Splendor Helmet Exotic. And it ended up getting nerfed, but that really just speaks to the value of the exotic, but not really the subclass because no one really used it for anything else.
right? No one used that subclass for anything other than the fact that you needed to use it for the helmet. Because it still was a big trade-off to use it because if you wanted to use bottom tree hammers, that has one of the the slowest super cooldowns in the game. So for like trials, you probably won't get your super 90% of the time. Um, but when now you have a thing where it doesn't do that anymore, so some breakers are probably going to fall off the map again in terms of usage, and you don't really want to see that. I'm not in Bungie shoes, but I don't want like if I worked hard on a subclass that I made, and it's like people try it out and be like, oh, you know what, Void 3.0 is better, and they go back. What does that say about like Arc? um,
Yeah,
and its upcoming rework is because like if Solar wasn't there, Solar arguably had a lot more bones and things I can work around with. Uh, and as opposed to Arc, Arc really doesn't have many things that are identities. That can either be a good thing or a bad thing. Like we saw with Solar, they already had an identity and they took away some of that identity for some other identity, and people don't like that. But
yeah,
for Arc, it could be, there's no identity, so they can just make stuff up and
yeah.
give
Well,
it
I would
one.
argue that, and the bar's not set as high.
Right, and no one's really expecting much from Arc because Arc is arguably one of the weaker subclasses for all three, classes. So,
Yeah, and also too, like I'm not saying that like Solar being bad, or let's not even say bad, like just being average, and you're not going to play it differently. I think that's the word I'm looking for. Like it's not going to be as oppressive as like Stasis at launch, and it just dominates Sandbox. But having one less option in a world where all the subclasses get that 3.0 update is is definitely not good either. And since we just spoke on exotics, like I kind of wanted to hear your thoughts, Christic, about the Stompy nerf or the concept of the Stompy nerf.
uh, well, that goes into the airborne effectiveness, doesn't it?
Yes.
So I guess we can talk about that sandbox change. I don't know if you've tested the airborne effectiveness.
Briefly, I noticed the bloom. I noticed there's like some bloom. That's what I
There,
felt like.
there, it is very difficult to hit shots in the air. I know Bungie said they're looking into, tuning it over time. I can say pretty heavily that probably needs some tuning, at least for primary weapons. Um, like I was running, was it Top Tree Dawn? I ate my grenade. I was using the BR, the BXR battler,
Yeah,
and I was just
feels
running
really nice.
around with an Icarus grip. you know? So that's like 85 plus, whatever the BR's base is. And I was having a worse experience than I remember playing, a week ago. And I'm just like, what's causing this issue? I feel like I should be better than I was before because, as a controller player, but I I couldn't tell you. I don't know what's going on under the hood.
Yeah,
But as in terms of the Stompy exotic, they're making an experience that's already lackluster, and then they're making it, minus 50. So you're going to be at 0 for all your guns.
yeah,
Um, I'm gonna
And
be
I mean,
honest,
yeah,
it probably is too much. Um, like, I don't think people are gonna be using Stompies anymore,
yeah.
at least for
Well,
jumping in the round.
I think the penalty was kind of harsh because like certain exotics are tied to a tool down. Like when you think of like the Titan exotic chess piece Armentarium, like you throw a grenade, like there's a grenade cooldown attached to it, but Stompies didn't really have that. Like you could slide at will and kind of jump at will, and whether or not that's the right play is a different discussion. But there weren't really any cooldowns associated with Stompies, which is kind of like what made it so strong, right? Like you didn't have to spec into strength, you didn't have to spec into discipline. Like you could just put all your stats into something else, recov, mobility, intellect, and kind of play around Stompies in place of like a cooldown exotic.
Right, and, I kinda get that, it didn't have any downsides, but the thing with the way they approach it now is that if I wanted to build into that, Stompies is the aerial exotic, whether Bungie likes to think of it as it or not. You're jumping up very high, you need to have good in-air,
Control.
shots. Yeah, potential. And if you have Stompies, you can't do that. Like you just can't. There's no build, there's no stat distribution, no guns you can use to overcome it.
Yeah.
And I think one of the biggest things I dislike about the change is like we're in the community, we know all the patch notes, we know everything about that. Some player isn't going to know. Some normal player that loves Stompies and using them for how long has been the 8 years? I
Yeah.
don't know.
He's like, what happened?
These changes aren't known on in game. They don't tell you that, hey, Stompy's is going to make it so that whenever you jump, you freaking literally can't shoot anything. It was the
Yeah.
same deal with the slide changes where they made, shotgun spread, increase when you slide. Where are you going to find that in game?
Yeah.
Nowhere. They did the same thing with the jumping now with airborne effectiveness. There's no one knows this besides, the people that read the
Yeah.
patch notes.
And I'm following up. And I think there's also something to be said about like exotics being used for utility and then exotics being used for kind of the spectacle in the sandbox. And I'll give an example. Like a utility exotic will be something that like reduces like your cooldown or maybe Armentarium, the Titan exotic chest piece that kind of gives you an extra grenade. But I remember back when we spoke in Destiny 1, and you brought up this idea that what if there was a Titan exotic where if you use a Ward of Dawn bubble and someone destroys it, it'll detonate and suppress everyone around it and send everyone flying. And it's funny, but when I thought about it, I really wouldn't mind having an exotic like that because it's entertaining.
Right. Back then I was really bored and I was just spitballing ideas of hey, this probably wouldn't be good, but wouldn't it be cool though?
Yeah. And the thing is like Destiny 2, it's a beautiful game and one of the better first person shooters on the market. And they could really lean into the spectacle nature of the sandbox and do well for themselves. Like if you think about how many people that you're gonna play against in PvP, regardless of skill level, you're gonna notice the players who can detonate an ability, climb up a wall, or approach an engagement in a different way more than someone who just has like a faster cooldown. Like
Yeah.
yeah. Oh, I was just gonna say, I think naturally the possibility of a Word of Dawn detonating near you is gonna be more memorable than getting your grenade 5 seconds faster.
Yeah, no, I think most cooldown exotics in general are very boring. I think it's just more of a dev issue of where like they things that are more fun are more dev intensive and cost more to make and stuff like that.
Yeah,
But there's a lot of things that are all about the spectacle, like Bacchus. You're trading your normal dodge for this, anime teleport where you could literally, go behind someone and shotgun them in the head and be like, nothing personal, kid, and then walk away.
yeah,
Um, there's a lot of exotics that are like that, but none of them are, particularly good. Just maybe with the exception of Bacchus.
yeah. I mean, I want to bring it up because I really want people to think about like when they introduce like a cooldown exotic or something that you're not really gonna see. it kind of makes you question, like, what are we gonna end up with towards the end? Like, when you think about the direction the game's going, like, I think things like that matter, especially when, like, it stops as a live service and just what you end up with is what you end up with.
Right. I think like m- I always think about that in the back of my head. Like, imagine if you're playing Mayhem, right? And you have super fast cooldown your super and your weapons and your whatever. At that point, what exotic are you putting on? You know, are you
Yeah,
putting? You're not putting on a cooldown exotic. So like, you want an exotic that does something interesting, or
yeah,
maybe like makes you more like that you can dodge or something like that. But like, I think I realized that in D1 when you were what's this Sunsinger, right? The
yep,
Sunsinger super radiance. Remember when you pop your super and your grenade would regen like super fast, unbelievably fast. So you
yeah,
would throw a grenade, and by the time your animation goes back, you can throw another one. So then it came to the point where there was an exotic that reduced your cooldown in radiance, but you couldn't throw your grenade faster or anything, so you literally just threw it the same amount of times. You just saw the bar go all the way up faster, but you couldn't throw your grenade.
yeah,
So at some point, you're gonna get there's a cap to how fast you can go,
yeah,
and, at that point, you want an exotic that does something a little bit more meaningful,
yeah.
you know?
So, I wanted to get your thoughts on the new PvP map, Disjunction. I know they just introduced it. It's been a while since they've added a new PvP map to the game, and I just kind of wanted to hear your thoughts or if you played it because I liked it. But
I played it, um, I can't say that I'm particularly fond of it. I
yeah,
don't know
that's
if I
fair.
like it because it's new, but I don't know how long that's gonna last. Um, I do think it does allow for a lot of different, uh, primaries. Like, there's a lot of big lanes for scout rifles, like, on the beach side.
Yeah,
There's a lot of tight corridors. The map is a little too big. I feel like they made it for Rift.
yeah,
It
I could
feels
see
like
that.
it feels like it would be a good Rift map.
Yeah, because and I think like the style of it is kind of subjective, but I did like the fact that there is a lot of different routes you can take to get around a team or to the other side, and I view it as kind of a tri-lane map. Like there's that center lane, there's not a lot of cover, but then there's like the outskirts, the kind of the grassy area. And then there's like the interior of the map where teams weren't really like rotating there as much, like the very far inside of the map. But I do like the fact there's kind of like an above area, there's some underground passages you can kind of sneak through. And I kind of like how many options you have to like run from a fight or take a fight and kind of make it work in your favor.
Yeah, you know what it reminded me of? It reminded me of like a combination of 2 maps. There was a map in D2 called Citadel, where it
Yep.
basically had like 5 lanes you can run through, and, that map was a little bit smaller, and then, like, another map in D1 called the Cathedral of Dusk, which was a lot bigger, but, like, more streamlined. There's only, like, 3 lanes.
Yeah.
This new map has 3 main lanes, but, like, there's, like, 500 different, like, connections you can, like, sneak through.
Yeah.
So, in that case, like, it's very interesting, and as in the Sandbox doesn't really have that in any shape or form, so that might be cool. But in terms of, like, maps that are good for Elim or Trials of Osiris, I'm gonna say that this one's a hard pass, but,
Yeah.
it could work over Rift for 100%.
Yeah. I haven't seen it in sixes yet, but I think in trials, like I'd love to see like really good players play on it and kind of the strategies they come up with. Now, I wanted to ask what you thought of like the scavenger and special ammo changes in PvP because for me, like scavengers don't work in PvP as of right now,
Mhm.
and I think it definitely flows better. Like special weapons feel less oppressive, but I thought it would feel worse than it felt. I don't know how if you kind of think that way or not.
I think it depends on what kind of player you are. Um, for me, this is a long time coming, bro. Like, they've been nerfing shotguns so much that you really before this patch, you really couldn't get away with aping unless you were using a slug shotgun, because those were pretty much untouched for a while.
Yeah.
And, now that they have touched them, they made it so that you don't have as much ammo. Um, I'm actually running a lot more double primary, honestly. I don't really snipe in 6s 'cause there's just too much going on, and I don't find that really enjoyable.
Yeah, fair enough.
But, I mean, you're the fusion man. You would know better than I. I don't know, because 'cause you're saying you're not having that much of an issue, and you fusion all the time. I think I saw you pull out your primary 3 times in my life. So, if you're not having an issue, then I'm sure fusions are fine,
Yeah, it was
and,
interesting because, like, I think a lot about, like, the flow of a match, and before the change, like, all I would see was, like, chaperones, like, that was, like, the Achilles heel of, like, a fusion, right? Because you have, like,
mhm.
the range, more range than a shotgun, but you can also, like, avoid the charge time. So, like, all I would see is chaperone, all I would see is chaperone, like, then you get hit with a sniper, and it's like no one's, like, really moving around that much because they have so much ammo, and I'm not saying, like, you'll never see a sniper again, but I definitely think the combat flows more because I was thinking that once they made this change and scavengers don't work, you'd see less movement. I don't know why. I just kind of thought, okay, people will move less because they don't have the strong gun all the time, basically. But I think there's a healthy balance. Like I'm seeing people push up when they run out of ammo, they're still looking to put damage in, and there's a certain flow. Like I think the only change they could make aside from this is like you spawn in with like one bullet instead of two, and then past that you're gonna have to kind of look into different like ammo economy strategies, like the crate system that they used in D1 or something along those lines. But I definitely think they could get away with how the special ammo is now and not have to worry too much and focus on more pressing issues.
Yeah, I'd agree. As far as special ammo goes, it's just I think right now it's probably the worst it's been, like, as opposed to, like, being able to abuse, like, or I guess I should say the best it's been for being able to not being run around with your special all the time. But, I don't really know. I feel like I'm gonna have to play a little bit more to really get it, but, like, I
Yeah,
need to play trials, honestly. I don't think the special ammo changes are gonna affect trials too much, and that's honestly the majority of what I play. You play elim the most,
yeah,
and if you're not having issues there, then I don't know, 6s is just kind of like, do whatever.
yeah. It could go either or.
Yeah, you could I run double primaries in 6s, I don't care.
Yeah. Now, in terms of how they balance the sandbox and PvP, I remember someone saying, they wish Xur didn't sell the main ingredient because that's all they would see in the Crucible. And the main ingredient was a weapon that was arguably one of the best fusion rifles in the game, and a vendor sold a very good roll on the perks, and it essentially made it accessible for everyone to use. And you kind of had a different perspective on it when you said like Bungie shouldn't balance by obscurity, and you kind of had a point because and if you think ahead, like everyone having access to a really good gun would get it patched sooner or touched up sooner, tuned sooner. And that's kind of what happened. Like once everyone started to use the main ingredient, they did get their range nerfed. And it kind of brings into question like what do you value more in the moment? The player experience or everyone getting a good gun and it getting looked at sooner?
So you're asking me which I value more?
Yes, or I'm asking you kind of like, where did you come up with that idea, and
That
like, do you
idea?
still believe that?
Okay. Well, I'm gonna be honest, uh, that idea was in my head since D1. I've been the most unluckiest person when it comes to gun rolls, okay?
Yeah,
So, when it came to the point where, um, people were running around with shotguns with shot package and all this, like, I'd never had that, so I felt like, these guns are too strong when you have, like, a god roll, but when you don't have a god roll, they're terrible. So, like, how can you balance a gun where like there's too many knobs and like, only one out of like 10,000 players has the pinnacle point of that gun. And, they might not even know it's the best gun. They might just think they're really good because, they have shot package on their shotgun.
Yeah.
So when it came down to the main ingredient, I'd rather have I don't like fusions. All right. But,
Yeah. Fair enough.
you know, if everyone's gonna have the main ingredient, it's fair game. If someone's using main ingredient against me and I'm having issues with it, I can just put it on. And
Yeah.
I know I have the same role as him because he also bought it from Jure. So,
Yeah.
as far as like, you know, obscure things that you know, goes kind of unnoticed for a while,
Yeah.
Bungie's starting to patch those holes up. Just this patch, they got rid of all of the legacy mods. So you can't use Paragon mods anymore on, legacy armor,
Yeah.
which, I was abusing on old Stompies. But now those are nerfed too, so guess I don't need to worry about that anymore.
Yeah, and the for the people that don't know, like the old Paragon mods, you could put on your armor pieces and make the cooldown for your dodge even less than what you would have gotten at like 100 mobility. So
Right,
they
and
took that out.
it was unobtainable by everybody. So you could only have it if you played during year, what was it, 2?
Yeah.
Year 1 or 2, and I was one of those people that kept it for some ungodly reason, and it
Mhm.
just turned out to be really good. But,
All right.
yeah, stuff like that, I don't know. It's a kind of a hard line you have to take, like, cause I have a lot of friends that are like, "Oh, I don't want this to get nerfed," because, Bungie's not doesn't really know about it yet, like, I
Yeah.
think one of your friends, maybe it was EP, who had, like, the rangefinder role, and that was the true god role, and, he was like, he was like, "Yeah, Jared's gonna have that one that has tap the trigger, but they're gonna just nerf tap the trigger.
Yeah.
I'm still over here gremlining it up,"
Yeah.
So it's I don't know, it's a fine line you have to take.
Yeah. Well, that's all we have time for today. So, Christic, thanks for taking the time to share your thoughts with us. I think there's a lot that people can learn from this and how they think about the game and the direction it's going. So, where can the people find you?
Well, if you want to go on Reddit, my username is Crystic_knight. That is a knight, like a sword and shield knight with a K. If you want to catch me on YouTube, uh, my name is Crystic, and I think my URL is youtube.com/ like Batman of Destiny.
Mhm.
So, don't ask me about that. One of my
Yeah.
videos explains it.
And also, in his Reddit, there is a link to a YouTube video from him, so you will be able to find his channel through the Reddit. And
Yes.
I know you stream on Twitch, and I kind of would wish your Reddit audience could kind of just transfer to your Twitch and just kind of see, and if they have any questions of how like mobility works, I could definitely ask you there. So I don't know if you have a link to that or
Yeah, my username on Twitch is Crystic. It's, just Crystic.
and
And,
guys.
if
Yep.
you can pop in the stream and ask me a mobility question. I don't do trials carries, though. Please don't come in there and ask for trials carries.
Yeah, guys, I mean, there's a lot there you can learn, and definitely like look through the Reddit because I'm sure there is something you can learn there, especially if you're trying to like min max your stats or trying to figure out like what you don't need and what you can kind of work with. So definitely look at that because it's going to help you optimize your stats for your future builds. And guys, Season of the Haunted has only been out for a day, so these are kind of our initial thoughts, and things may change over time. But if you have a different perspective or agree with us, let us know in the comments. I'll leave a timestamp and links to our channels in the description below. So thanks, guys. Bye. A lot of work went into that.
Yeah, you had way more questions than I thought, bro.
Yeah,
Like,
I well, I was looking through the old TWABs, like the old TWABs where they talked about like sandbox tuning and kind of what they want to do with Void 3.0, because a lot of the TWABs are kind of like they're important, relevant stuff, but small changes. But anytime you change like a core subclass, like you're changing possibly the direction the game goes in because if like 3 months from now, no one's playing a void subclass or no one's playing a solar subclass, that's like one less option. So you kind of have to make sure they all kind of bring something to the table. So I
Yeah. And
like it.
as far as solar, I don't think it's met that threshold, honestly.
I don't either. I don't either.
Because with Void, you have all the debuffs, you have, like, the overshields, you have Devour, which is super
Yep.
strong. Um, I don't know, like, and the thing is that you have volatile rounds, those are still strong, so Solar kinda missed the ball with the whole, you know, interacting with your solar gun, you know? There's
Yeah.
nothing there's n I think Yotun is the only gun that actually does anything, and
Well, even then,
right?
like when you think about like the framework that they had for all these 3.0 updates, like they introduced like to me at least, they introduced this concept of verbs and like what the abilities do are verbs. So was Void, I think they had like three debuffs, so like suppressing,
Mhm.
volatile, and then there was another debuff. Um, but then they had like the positive verbs, which is like vanish, invis, overshield, and then like devour. So it's just like each class was assigned a verb. So like in this case, Hunter, Vanish, Titan, Overshield, and Warlock Devour. But it's like you have to assign a verb for Solar too. And I
Right.
want to say Warlock is heal or like
It's
reco.
supposed to be.
Yeah, I think they tried to make Radiant or Radial the
They
the
they they
Hunter.
they made it radiant, right? They
Yeah.
they just made a damage bonus. Like, are they leaning towards maybe solar being the only damage kind of focused subclass identity? Or
Yeah,
I
it's
don't know,
kinda
it was very
it's a gray
generic.
area. It's a gray area, and I was using Solar Titan, and I was trying to get the build going, like, trying to get sunspots to go, and I'm like it was hard for me to do it. Like, I'm like, it's kinda hard to, like, really make a sunspot if you think about it. Like, you either have to shoulder charge someone or, like, put yourself at some disadvantage or lean on a Lorelei um, Splinter helmet to make a sunspot when you barricade. But it's like a lot of the kit of the Solar Titan shouldn't be locked behind, or it shouldn't flourish behind an exotic helmet. Like I feel like the helmet should complement kit
Yeah, you shouldn't
and
need
not
the
be the
helmet.
sole catalyst that makes it work. So it's like I almost want more sunspots, like in a weird way. I'm like, I don't even play Solar Titan, but I'm not gonna switch off Void to use it, you know?
Right. It's like sunspots were the Titan thing, right? So I feel like that's their thing, and they have an identity, but it's still not living up to the fantasy.
It no, it's
And
not.
I don't know what hunter is. Like,
Yeah,
is
it
verb wise, I think they gave it the one that gives radiant. But I don't think radiant is an engaging mechanic. Like,
yeah,
wasting your dodge for a whole minute just to give everyone a damage boost, which they probably already have somehow somewhere else, you know?
yeah, and with the Hunter, I almost wish they would have leaned into like was it Chains of Woe, the perk that like you land precision hits, you get like stability on your guns? Is that what that was? Or
So that was Gunslinger's Trance.
okay, Gunslinger's Trance. I wish
I
they would have leaned
wanted
it.
that.
Yeah, I
I
wish they would have leaned
wanted
into
so
that
bad.
fantasy more
They
because
instead they removed it.
yeah, so like hunters, they can really lean into like damage events or like hitting precision headshots, like which I would consider a damage event, or burning someone, and you get some type of buff, whether it's decreased cooldown or more stability on your gun, and that could be the class. Like if you really like weapons and you want to make the weapon like the best it can be in terms of stats, like you could use a gunslinger and really give it more stability. And I think there's a fantasy there when you talk about like the stasis fantasy being like slowing, freezing, and shattering, and
Mhm.
then the void being like overshields, void being like stuff you use before a fight, OVs, invis, and then devour. Like during a fight, I think that's where like the hunter gunslinger can live. And that's where it can like play its role. And I don't really feel like I'm doing that now. I don't feel like I play it any differently, but I don't think it has access to damage events and a bunch of weapons that benefit from that as easily anymore. It's just you dodging your radiant, and I don't know. I think the damage buff is kind of. negligible too. I mean, with the 140, you have to hit one less headshot, so two headshots in a body, and then with the
Yeah,
120, one headshot, two bodies. Like, is
ex
that
es
enough?
yeah, especially for PvP, it really didn't bring anything. It actually lost things for PvP. For PvE, you can kinda see where they're going. I just wanted more of an identity, like, for
I did too.
Gunslinger, it felt like that was the gunslinger class, you know? You had all your tools was like you just had a freaking kit of like, oh, which throwing knife am I bringing to this fight? You know, which grenade? You know, which gun? How can I buff this gun? You know, with the reload and the handling speed kind of dodge thing. I thought that was really cool, but it it moved away from what made Gunslinger cool was the precision.
Yeah,
Being good with your guns got you rewarded, gave you more super
exactly.
energy,
Yeah,
more stability, more reload and whatever for your teammates in the top tree. Like it really I wanted that to be the identity. That and your kit. And maybe they didn't have to give a verb. You know, you don't have to
sure.
like it it it's kind of weird, but if every subclass, like every element has its own 3D buffs, 3 buffs kind of thing. That kind of homogenizes it a little bit too.
It does.
I don't want Bungie to think pigeonhole them into thinking that, you know, they have to make 3 of these, 3 of that.
Yeah, I
But at the
agree.
same yeah, but at the same time, eh, they didn't do that and they still missed the mark. So I don't know. At least for
Yeah,
me, they missed it.
and I really liked your tool belt analogy because my thing is like you can add more to the tool belt. Like you can give all the subclasses more grenades, but are you gonna use them differently? Like, are you gonna use the tools differently? And that's where I feel like it kind of misses the mark. So that I do like that tool belt analogy.
Right. Like, for example, the warlock, you know, you got access to all the grenades, but are you going to use any of those grenades, those new grenades that you got, because one of your aspect just says it buffs the original grenades that you had. So at one point you're like, okay, well that makes sense because they're these are their warlock grenades, quote unquote, you know, so
Yeah.
that they're more adept at using them. The same can't be said for the other subclasses, and it's kind of in this weird gray area.
Yep, that's what
Like,
I call it. That's what I've been calling it. Like it's
yeah,
like
like because warlock, it's like okay, they have this healer thing, but they also have this super aerial playstyle, which, you know, is useless in PvE, you know? So, like, obviously, PvE players gonna lean more towards the healing stuff, but they took away a lot of the synergies and stuff for the healing, and they gave healing to the other subclasses, so you don't need to be the healer anymore because other people can heal.
yeah.
And especially, you know, with Void having Devour and stuff, probably don't need to get healed either. So where do they fit in the sandbox? Uh, I couldn't tell you, man.
Yeah. I worry that because we've seen subclasses launch too hot, but I don't think we've seen subclasses launch cold. So it's an interesting dilemma. And because I know when they were working on Stasis, they were trying to justify and compare it to like the core three subclasses because it launched hot, and part of the reason was they were trying to justify why would you freeze someone when you could one hit shoulder charge with back when you could do that, or one hit like sticky nade. Like why would you take the trouble to freeze somebody? So they kind of overcompensated. But here, I don't know if they undercompensated or if they played it safe, but I definitely don't think they leaned into the fantasies as hard, the power fantasies as hard as they did with Void. Like I feel like you could look at all these Void classes and say they took what they did and made it better. They took Bubble, Word of Dawn, and gave overshields and made them more accessible. They made
Mhm.
hunters be able to go invisible easier. You know, I think it's kind of a different story with Devour. I don't really play Warlock, but I'm sure there's more ways to get Devour procced at least.
Yeah,
But
in PvE, I would say in PvE where, you know, the majority of people play, I feel like Warlock is so much better. But in PvP,
yeah,
I mean, if you didn't engage with the Devour subclass, it's largely the same. You know, the child of the old gods aspect is kind of a menace still, but, you know, um, as far as like power, you
yeah,
know, power wise. I think Void actually hit the sweet spot in terms of strength. There are some things that were a little maybe out of tuned, but they can fix that. I feel like I feel like solar, it's weak. It's not the fact that it's too weak. It's the f-
It leaves more to be desired.
the I think it's the philosophy of the elements. Like it's actually deeper than something that they can fix really fast. Like Overshield Titans having too many barricades kind of deal. They make it longer
Less.
cooldown. Invis, they're too strong, so make it ping on the radar. You can manage those things, but like solar, I don't know what they do to solar to make it better.
I honestly, and this could be a bad take, but I honestly think like I tried out Warlock briefly before we did this, and I really liked how there is a aspect on Warlock that enhances grenades, and it makes grenades like the solar grenade will like make like little pools of lava and spit out fire, and I expected that across all the subclasses. Like I would love to see them make a new warlock aspect and make that aspect that enhances the grenades a fragment, just so the grenades kind of play into the spectacle a bit more across all of solar. Because like a lot of the Titan kit is kind of hard to get the sunspots going and really like get the kit moving, start it up. And then with the hunter kit, a lot of it is either getting the damage boost, becoming radiant, or like getting solar kills with solar weapons and you get like increased recov, or it deals with like the cooldowns a lot, but there's not a lot of spectacle and a lot going on aside from that. And I almost would wish that warlock aspect that enhanced grenades was just a fragment applied that you could apply to all the subclasses and just kind of
You
get a
have like an
taste of that.
individual fragment for like each grenade type kind of deal. Like
Yeah, or just something to where like there needs to be more going on, and that's my
right,
thing.
yeah, yeah. I kind of agree with that. The I don't know how to explain this for Gunslinger, but like I feel like solar in general as an element feels kind of weak because uh, that whole system where you have Scorch, right?
Yeah,
You build stacks, and then when they get to 100, they
then they
ignite,
ignite.
and then
Yeah,
they explode into a big explosion. And half the fragments are dealing with that explosion, that
I agree.
ignition.
I agree. Yes.
And here's the problem with that: 9 times out of 10, you kill something before you have enough stacks on it. And if it dies, it doesn't ignite. There's no spectacle. Like igniting something is cool.
I
Like
agree.
their body flies off and then it immediately combusts. But like I'm gonna be honest, I've been playing. I don't recall igniting anybody unless the ability specifically ignites something
Yeah, I
without
mean,
having to build.
I would be okay with this. This might be a bad idea, but like if you shoot something with explosive rounds or time payload, like that plays into you know making them ignite or like adding scorch or something. Like I don't know. It just seems like it's hard to ignite people, and it's just like there needs to be more ways to do it.
Yeah,
Like
it's hard
I
to
wouldn't be
ignite
against that.
people, and there's no synergy with the already established exotics like Tiku's divination. The bow doesn't do
Yeah,
anything special.
yeah,
It doesn't apply scorch, doesn't ignite. Same thing with Sunshot. They added a new perk that adds scorch when you kill something, but that still leads into the thing that if you kill the person next to it, they don't ignite. So I
yeah,
feel like that actually could have been something they could have added, like volatile rounds, where maybe scorch rounds or something.
yeah.
So
Something.
when you ignite someone, all right, you get scorch rounds for 15 seconds, and like your solar gun just, blasts solar energy and then causes them to burn, and then they ignite and then they die. And then you're just constantly igniting everybody.
Yeah,
That would be cool. But now we're in this weird situation where like they don't explode because, they're too weak or something. I don't know.
yeah. And just when I think about the direction, I'm like, is this subclass gonna hold up? Like once everything gets that 3.0 update, it's just like, where is this gonna sit in the big scheme of things? I can't see it sitting really high right now. And the only way I think they could offset that is with like some really strong exotic that they introduce, but that kind of pigeonholes the players too. They don't even realize it yet, but like playing one strong exotic on one subclass is all you're gonna see from that subclass. So it just that kind of limits you too, just as much as having a super strong subclass just dominating. It's one less option basically.
Yeah, I will say that I feel like Gunslinger is probably in a really good spot for PvE. I just it's good because it has good damage, but I feel like it doesn't have anything like what you were alluding to, like the spectacle of
Yeah, I mean,
things.
even there was a it was one aspect on Gunslinger where you build up some stacks. I think it's either solar kills or like solar hits, something of that nature, and then you get like this a bunch of trip mines tied up, and it's like one big trip mine bag,
Right. Yeah. 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 Yeah.
and you can like throw it at people. And I tested it; it does like 120 damage. So I'm like,
Yeah,
this
it
should
does
one
like
hit.
nothing in PvE.
Yeah, like why is this an aspect? So it was like some of those things. I think they'll probably buff that, but it's just like that's part of the problem, like it launching in that state and people are like, I'm not really going to switch to solar now. Like that's kind of it doesn't help the case of solar 3.0.
I will say that Bungie did do a good job at making things uh look cool for solar. Like I feel
I like
like
the trailer. I mean,
yeah, no, so like the Titan slide melee, as horrible as it is, it looks cool.
it does.
It needs to be a little faster, but it does look cool. Does it need a one-hit KO? Probably not. Make it really fast and just do a lot of damage. Doesn't have to kill people. It's the
Yeah, I
same
think
thing with the Warlock, snap fire thing. I think that is the coolest melee they have ever done.
yeah,
It's so cool. I made an entire I literally today, I made an entire build with Winter's Guile with the finger snap. So I have it so that I snap, everything dies. I get like Winter's Guile times 5 and I run up to like a boss. I shotgun him with a 1-2 punch and I just flick him and he disappears.
yeah. I think that I love that. Like I love the flick. It's cool.
It has so much finesse
It has
and cool
style.
factor. Yeah,
Yeah,
style.
yeah.
I love that's the direction I like Bungie going in. They just need to figure out the foundational kind of elemental kind of thing.
Yeah, well, I think they need to trust themselves too. Like, it's okay to have a bad idea, and I think there's enough people there to where their ideas, like the good ones, are gonna rise to the top. And even if it's kind of clunky, like I think a lot of their players could respect a good idea when it's done, or expect something different when it's done well. And I think the flick is a perfect example of that. It just I would love to see more of that spread throughout the other classes. And if that's anything that Arc 3.0 is going to be like I'm all for it. Um, I would rather see too much than not enough. I think that's kind of one of those
Yeah.
things. I don't know what.
If they lean into that whole style and finesse kind of thing,
Yeah, people would not have a problem with that.
even if they come out like not good, like I would still kind of like I still use the solar warlock just because I like the flick. I
Exactly.
know it's not I could kill people with my guns faster, but that's
Exactly.
not the same, you know?
Yeah.
So they just need to bring it up to maybe Void's level right now. Because I think Void's is actually in a perfect spot in terms of power
Yeah.
level.
And comparing it. Yeah.
Um, Stasis obviously was way too hot out the gate. I think no one is gonna argue that.
Yeah.
But I don't know, I think Stasis is actually in a good spot right now too.
Yeah. I wouldn't want them to make it any stronger. Like
No.
that's kind of where I'm at. Maybe I'm kind of burned and biased, but
Yeah,
yeah.
no, I think Warlocks are really strong. They have the freezy melee, they have the turret, you know, Behemoth, um, the melee kind of a little janky, but still pretty decent. The
Yeah.
slide's alright.
Yeah, it's an accelerant, like, there's only
Yeah.
a handful of abilities like that actually speed up your movement, like that and Icarus Dash is what
Mhm.
comes to mind.
And then Hunter's obviously that's like my main trials uh setup and I love everything about the Revenant Hunter, except for the shurikens. They're awful. Like, you know what the funniest thing about the shurikens is? I hate them because they have too much aim assist.
Yeah, shurikens.
No one ever understands this. When I am aiming a shuriken, I'm almost always going for a ricochet because, like, if they're behind cover, they're in a corridor or something.
Yeah,
I'm never like throwing at somebody just out the gate. You know, it does 30 damage. There's no point in doing that.
yeah, it's
But when I throw it, it doesn't go where you aim. It goes where the player is. So like half the time the guy's behind a wall and I'll throw it at an angle at the wall, but it'll actually change the trajectory 45 degrees and try to go towards the player that's behind the wall, and it'll just bounce off the freaking wall that he's hiding behind. And I'm just like,
yeah,
why can't my stuff
definitely.
just go where I'm throwing it?
I've
You know?
definitely missed a lot as well, and it's probably like a defensive thing. Like use it defensively and don't try to like map people. But
Yeah, make
yeah,
it so the aim assist kicks in after it ricochets off the wall. You know?
yeah,
Not when I'm throwing it, but I don't know.
we'll make it work.
Make it work. But just that if Bungie ever watches this, guys, you did great with Void. All right, you over corrected with stasis, but you got it down to a good spot. You have the power level down. You just gotta match it.
Yeah, match it. All right, I'll let you go, Crystic. Thanks for joining, man.
Sure, sure, sure. I hope you have a good one. Thanks for having me.